Okay, so we're broadcasting.
Good morning. I hope everyone is doing well in the
Yes.
middle of our winter season here. You know what? I can't believe, and you guys have to tell me your opinion. We are almost at the end of January.
Yeah,
Right.
it's moving fast.
I
It's
thought we just celebrated New Year's Eve.
Shar, are you in Mexico?
Well, I still am. Yes, I am, sir.
I'm in the middle of a blizzard.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, your January is much nicer than mine.
Well, due to our accommodations in our little casa, we might spend the last 2 months in a little bit nicer casa.
Very good.
And we're gonna call it, I guess they call them a villa. I don't know. But anyway, yeah, blizzard. I miss the blizzard sometimes.
Your nose is growing, Shar.
Well, I'm coming back to Colorado in early February, and that way I can get an American computer. Because as you know, that my computer died my first week here, and I learned that different countries have different computer keyboards layouts.
Oh, wow.
So it's very fascinating. But in Durango, where Sam is at, I guess they've been dealing with blizzards too, right, Sam?
Yeah, that's right. So we've had a lot of good snow here just recently. I think we've gotten about almost 2 feet of snow in the past couple days here. So it's been kind of nice. I mean, it just gives that cozy feeling of when you look outside and it's bright and you see that fluffy powder out there.
Oh
It's
yeah.
kind of neat. But I know it can be a pain, but it's nice.
Well, it's beautiful until you have to get out there with a shovel and try to get all the snow off your roof before your roofs cave in, right?
Yep.
Well, at least people in Colorado know how to drive in the snow, so that's a benefit for sure.
Right.
But Oregon, where you're at, do you have kind of a similar challenge up there, Monty?
Yeah, we definitely have similar challenges. We're in the middle of a blizzard that should bring about 6 inches in the next 4 hours. So it's great. I mean, like Sam was saying, it does feel comfortable and it gives you that warm and cozy feeling until it's time to go out and plow.
Yeah.
Then the reality of it hits.
Right.
And meanwhile, guess what I do yesterday? I slip on my brand new wetsuit and my flippers and my scuba gear, and I take it for a test drive in the ocean.
Yeah.
You're killing me.
Yeah.
Well, I needed to make sure my wetsuit fit because I want to get finally certified in scuba. It's only been since I was 22 years old that I actually took the class.
Oh, that's great.
But so yeah, there's definitely a difference. How about you? I think Sumit is on with us, right, Sumit?
Yeah.
That's right.
So what's your world like in India?
Well, no snow, no traffic disruptions, but by Indian standards, it's pretty cold out here as well. Although you'd probably laugh when I tell you the temperature, it's about in the mid 40s right now, mid 40s to the early 50s.
But no snow.
No, we don't get snow in my city.
Okay. Well, I would like to invite you to Colorado sometime, and that way you can get an exposure to the snow someday.
No, I've actually lived in the mountains earlier when I was a child, and we did get snow a few times a year. No blizzards though, so it was still fun. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, it is the top of the hour, and so we do need to think about getting started here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and so all our guests can see. We are, here on Zoom, of course, but we are also broadcasting live on several different platforms, and we'll have this we'll have this recording posted on our YouTube, as well as LinkedIn. We'll be showing some of the clips on LinkedIn as well. So
That's fantastic. Well, welcome everyone. We are so excited to have you on board, and we are the People Strategy Forum, and we do this weekly, every Wednesday, Mountain Time. So if you live in India or Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, or Oregon, or Durango, Colorado, or wherever you live, you have access to it, as we were just talking about. And we are a mastermind where we help people thrive, customers and people our employees love. And we show the very best strategies to attract and retain the very best talent. So today our hosts would be myself, and my name is Shar Miller, and I have a unique perspective because I've been in human resources for over 25 years, and as an executive HR person, even I've been a chief HR officer. Also, I've done interim HR director work, and I also do career coaching right now. So a lot of people are trying to transition their careers. So I help people transition their careers. And then also I am an owner, a founder, and the chief HR officer of Rocky Mountain Health Advocates. And we have the pleasure of working with the gentleman who is our guest speaker today. So we'll have an interesting conversation because we work with this gentleman. So I'll talk about him in a minute, but we also have Sam Reeve. He is the CEO and founder of Comp Team, and Comp Team, Total Rewards and Compensation. I've also had the pleasure of working with Sam, and he's helped my company with our total rewards and compensation programs. And I will tell you, we've had some outstanding outcomes. I would say the productivity of our employees have greatly increased. In fact, we've been thriving through this past year, which is unusual for a lot of companies. And then we have the support and the pleasure of working with Sumit. And if you look, Sumit has worked with some phenomenal companies. He's a people strategist. And I love the fact that Sumit talks as an employee perspective as well, from more of a global sense, because many executive leaders now are needing to learn how to work in the global world, supporting staff in other countries. So this Sumit is also one of our hosts. So before I introduce Monte George here, I just want to talk about a couple of logistics. You'll notice that we are on a webinar, and also we are now doing lives. So it depends on the technology that you're using, let's put it that way. But there's a chat box at the bottom of the screen where you can participate with us. So we truly appreciate your comments, your question, your participation, and we will interact with you. And at times we'll invite you into the conversation. So don't be shy. Say hello. And you'll notice Sumit has actually put a post there. And also, we just want to remind everybody, if you're going to put a comment, make it to all attendees and the panelists. So everyone can see your commentary. So at this point, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker today, and his name is Monte George. He is, excuse me?
Good morning.
Good morning. And Monte is the owner and founder of the Talent Network, right? Can you say
yes,
what
the recruiting network?
Absolutely. And Monte is fantastic. So you might want to find Monte on your LinkedIn or your other social media platforms. He's a great resource. And I have had the pleasure and the honor of working with Monte when I was doing an interim director of HR position for a challenge. And Monte is a fantastic team member, and he has an outstanding team to help and hire the very best talent of the organization. So later in the presentation, take a look at his bio, and I think you'll really find he's a true expert, and take a look at his website as well. So let's go ahead and get going. Our topics today is hiring for the right competencies and behaviors. And believe me, it is changing. As a company owner right now, hiring the right competency and behaviors has changed. And also, we're going to have open discussion throughout. And today, Monty, you get the pleasure of talking to all three of us.
That sounds great to me, Shar.
And you know why? Because all three of us, meaning Sam and Sumit and myself, have different perspectives and different backgrounds. So we are now going to merge and talk about what's happening today in the now. And so we thought that this would be a great opportunity to do that. So Monty, I understand you've got some slides to share with us today. And maybe you could introduce yourself a little more thoroughly than I did. So welcome, Monty.
Thank you so much, Shar. I appreciate that. Yeah, my name is Monte George. I'm the president of the Recruiting Network. The Recruiting Network has been in business over 20 years, and we focus primarily on CPG and healthcare. We've been doing CPG for about a little over 20 years, and healthcare for about 15 years. We have 7 recruiters and 3 candidate research managers that go out every day and find candidates for companies like Rocky Mountain Healthcare Associates and other clients that we work with. So it's a pleasure to be here. My background is varied in corporate as well as recruiting, and I lead the team. I spend time with candidates every day so I can stay in the mix as well as speaking with clients. So I always try and stay grounded. It keeps me realistic when I'm not only dealing with my recruiters, but also my research department, which is kind of the grind of the company. But between the two, we were able to work things through, and it's very exciting to be here.
And
So,
I have a question for you.
Okay.
For those of us that are ignorant, what is CPG?
Oh, Consumer Product Group. Sorry, consumer products.
I'm like,
You live in a world of
I know what
acronyms.
healthcare is because I've worked in healthcare a long time. But I just didn't understand the consumer product group.
Consumer product groups are companies like Coca-Cola, Frito-Lay, large organizations. They're usually Fortune 100 companies that we work with. We also do some work in beverage and alcohol beverage. So
okay.
Hopefully that clears it up a little bit.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I just want to have it clear for our audience.
Absolutely. Feel free to check or cross-check if I'm using acronyms that may or may not make sense. So
okay.
Sure.
Thank you.
So Monty, I mean, I just a quick question as we're getting started here. I mean, I'm just really interested because I know you've been doing recruiting for like you said, over 20 years now. And I imagine there's been some significant changes as due to the pandemic and so forth. How has recruiting changed over this time? Has there been a significant change in the way we do things?
Absolutely. Sam, some of the biggest changes we've seen in recruiting on the healthcare side is a lot of the companies that we work with in healthcare are set up with ancillary services or ancillary surgeries and surgery centers, physicians, and secondary. So what's happened with the insurgence of ER and critical care and other areas of the hospital that are so urgent to take care of COVID-19 patients is all the clients that we've worked with are now basically have been put on hold for over 6 months. So if you're looking to get a surgeon for a secondary operation that doesn't have anything to do with cardiology or perhaps pulmonology, which are obviously huge areas with COVID-19 that hit, all of those functions have been put off on surgery. So how it's affected our company is a lot of those clients for the first 6 months of the pandemic basically stopped all of our jobs, put everything on hold. So we went to New York, got involved with the pandemic, worked with some of the assisted living, which is really ground central in New York for the pandemic in March and April and May. And we made 10 placements of RNs, nurse practitioners, and other lower level nursing positions. And we really had to adjust our format on what we were doing. Consumer products, the large companies pretty much stayed the same. They did tighten up and stop recruiting in the beginning, but they've returned. And some of the jobs that were put on hold have actually come back in healthcare. So it's really been a big stall. There's been 6 months of no work or different work. And that's what we've done is adjusted. And we were very fortunate to have Rocky Mountain Healthcare advocates come along at that time and be able to work with them. So we're involved in some other things as well, but that have kind of diversified our portfolio. But, you know, to answer your question in a short phrase, it's really just been very difficult and we've had to adapt. So it's been interesting and not completely lucrative. It's had its challenges.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I guess over 10% of the workforce is unemployed right now. I mean, has that made things more challenging, or is it having more candidates better, or is it the fact that you had to do a lot more screening, and what is the impact there?
That's a great question, Sam. You know, the situation in candidate recruiting is still the same.
Okay.
You know, we've got candidates that are highly qualified, that have a lot of the competencies that our clients are looking for. Those candidates are still the same. There are fewer jobs, I would say, and a lot more demand right now in healthcare. So there's a lot more competition happening. We've got it, especially in the nurse industry, RNs, nurse practitioner, physician assistants, high levels of competency, where in the past, those individuals were able to kind of really set their own wages, if you will, and set their own hours. So a typical nurse practitioner would work one job 20 hours a week for the highest pay and another job for 25 hours a week for the best benefits. Those jobs have now changed, and those same nurse practitioners and RNs have come back to me and said, I'm only going to work full time. You know, I want a job that just really gives me ability right now. And there's a lot less a la carte shopping. And you know, there's a huge shortage of qualified nurses in general. But what that's done is really changed the dynamic of having the candidate really demanding, going back to the client saying, well, this is all we have. You know, where there was a diversified portfolio of jobs, now they're just saying, this is the area that we really want to hire in. The core competencies have changed because of the pandemic. And now, you know, we really we're screening a lot harder, you know, with our candidates. So anyway, it has changed it significantly. And it'll be interesting to see how it changes over the next 2 to 3 years with vaccines becoming more prevalent.
Right.
Well, and I will say with Rocky Mountain Health Advocates, we are not looking for the top-notch. We look for top-notch people, but individuals that have the qualifications at the level that a nurse or a typical nurse practitioner would have. And so it's fascinating but those individuals need that extra income because they're looking to supplement perhaps the change of their income levels that they've seen in the past. But they need flexibility and they need time so they can do the regular nursing positions. And so it's an interesting phenomenon to be an executive HR person for healthcare, now have a company that it doesn't really require that executive health or that level of healthcare professional, but they need the income that and what we might be able to provide. Yeah. So it is. That's why Monte and I have had just an interesting experience working together, because we're learning that all of this change is really impacting the healthcare recruitment space.
So Monte, I know you have some slides to share. Why don't we bring those up, because I want to show what we have as far as the competencies and so forth, and how that's used in the recruiting area.
Sure. Let's talk about it. That sounds great. get this going here. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about hiring for the right competencies and behaviors. And, as I was thinking about this, as I was putting together the slides and going back through my own experiences, it really gets down to starting with well-crafted expectation and realistic goals on the side of the hiring manager or the company. It's really important to have realistic expectations and goals, and to spend time, crafting it from HR and then disseminating it throughout the organization. HR has a puritanical way of looking at things. I mean, they are kind of like, in my mind, they're a little bit up in the tower looking down, and the reality is, we people in the streets need to make it happen. So, having said that, I will say that Shar is the most realistic HR person I've ever worked with. And I worked with a lot of HR people. It can be a
Well,
little
thank you.
tyrannical. It can be a little bit, and Shar knows this too. And I'm sure Sam and Sumit have experienced this. It can be very top-down push, but when you work with one of the top 10% HR managers like Shar, then it becomes more collaborative. And that's really the effort, to be able to hire the right competencies and behaviors. It's setting goals and setting parameters, and then more importantly, adjusting those. Like two things like COVID, when things change, competencies change a bit and behaviors change. Team
Yes.
collaboration is the key to success, I think.
And I think that was the magic. So when I started working with Monte how many years ago? Maybe 3 years ago.
Yeah, I think it's been 3 or 4 years now. Time flies.
I left my corporate job and I started doing interim HR director work. And it was an opportunity to work with Monte. And I realized at that time that when I was working my traditional corporate HR job, that I did not have a true collaborative partnership with my recruitment department. And when Monte started working with me as a interim HR leader, I opened my eyes to the fact that this collaborative partnership and communication has to happen almost every day. Every day we were either, in our cars with, of course, safely in our cars, openly talking about what the CEO expected, and the CFO, and quite candidly, the CFO had a big part of that too, because we were hiring nurse practitioners and RNs and MAs, and there were certain expectations about how much we could afford to hire and find the very best talent. And so Monte and I had to collaborate heavily in order to meet the need to hire over 20 professionals to meet that organization's needs.
So what does that look like? I mean, when you go into an organization, Monte, I mean, there's a lot of things that, because when we look at this from a business perspective, the C-suite is saying, okay, we need to fill this many seats, and we need, this year, and they're thinking, okay, we need to do this whole list. We need them from these areas, but they're not really doing they're trying to get things done. They're not doing a great job of communicating their particular culture, the competencies that are needed in each of these roles. So how do you step in and get that information from them? Do you ask certain questions?
Absolutely. The way I start off, Sam, is I interview my client just like I would my candidate, and maybe even more thoroughly in the beginning, because to really break it down and find out information early on saves time for my team and allows my research department to be more effective. As an example, just yesterday, I had a very successful interview process with an aesthetic nurse, a nurse that administers Botox and does cosmetology. The client loved her. They thought she had a great attitude. She had all the right behaviors, if you will, and she had most of the right competencies. However, what they didn't tell me is not only did they want her to do dermal fillers, which is typical Botox and those type of things, they didn't tell me that they also needed laser work. And I don't even know if they knew in the beginning. I believe what happened is they had two RNs doing this position and decided to melt it down to one. But since they didn't know, I couldn't know. And when they went back and reviewed the candidate, they told me all the great things about her, but that they wanted to continue to look because they wanted somebody with laser skills to go along with nurse injecting, if you will, or aesthetic injecting. So it was frustrating for me, and I had to really think through and say, did I do all the things that I was supposed to in the interview to find out, what the competencies that they wanted? And I decided that that they didn't really know at that point. And it's an evolutionary process, and I call it fire for effect. I send candidates in, and Shar and I have played this game a little bit, where Shar will tell me, okay, so I need a nurse practitioner, and these are the competencies in this particular position. I was working with Shar before. It was a drug rehab situation where they had to know certain specifics, and as I sent candidates in, Shar would say, no, I need this adjusted and make sure they have these areas of competency. And this is no longer an issue or even something we're seeking. And I think it was Dan that we were working with. Is that the CEO,
Yeah,
Shar?
the CEO, Dan, yes.
The CEO changed his mind a lot, like daily. I think
Yes.
Shar had a few interesting nicknames for this guy when we were in the car back and forth because
Drunken sailor.
I'm glad you said it before I had to, but
Well, I don't care because he sold the business, so.
absolutely. Well, and good for him. I hope he did well, but his behavior was irrational. And when you're dealing with irrational clients, you need to take a breath or even interdepartmental people who are irrational and changing their mind a lot on competencies. You have to take a moment, take a breath, and ask yourself, is this something I can still continue? Well, I worked probably till 2 a.m. finding the candidate who had all the competencies. And I can tell you, in Southern California, that candidate's either a golden unicorn, or B has already been found as working. So the team really has our work cut out for us, but hopefully that kind of explains, what we run into as far as clients either A, changing their mind, or B, not necessarily knowing what they want in the beginning and having things evolve. And it doesn't happen just between recruiter and client. It happens interdepartmentally all the time. So communication is the key. Fortunately for me,
and may I add, when I mentioned the CFO, I mentioned there's other executives as well. So it could be the marketing vice president, or it could be the IT director. It depends on the department, and expectations do change. And part of the challenge is that our world is changing so fast. Technologies are changing, healthcare is changing, our political environment is changing. And so it's the recruitment and the talent leader or HR leader. That is why Monte and I literally almost every day would talk, because I knew it was frustrating for him, because he would send me 5 to 10 awesome resumes. And then I'd turn around and go, well, these are great and great people, but they're not fitting the CEO's needs. And then I would end up in a meeting at 7 a.m. with my CEO in front of a whiteboard, and his expectation would change. So I literally would have to call Monte and say, help me here, because it's something different now.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting point. So one is, of course, identifying the correct competencies for the role. But the next piece that needs to be considered is the people you're working with. As Shar mentioned, sometimes certain leaders, they may be difficult to get along with. They may be great to get along with. They are looking for certain types of behaviors themselves and people to fit. So do you interview the leadership, or do you? I guess it really depends on the size of the organization. But how do you find out that right fit, or to ensure that that relationship is going to work with the candidate and their managers or leadership?
That's a great question, Sam. So in working the system, what I often do is there are two people or two departments that I generally want to interview. I want to interview the hiring manager first because they're ground zero, right? They're going to ultimately be accountable for this person. They're going to either do a 30 or 90-day review. So it's kind of their call. But in doing that, if I'm working with an excellent HR manager or senior C-suite level and they're open door policy, I've got a couple of great clients that way, the more I can talk to them through the process. And Shar just mentioned technology and healthcare changing. What used to be maybe an hour-long conversation might be a 2-hour text back and forth. So it's kind of interesting. I mean, we're all busy, right?
Yeah.
And we all have our phones with us all the time. And sometimes a C-suite manager may be involved in a meeting and texting me back and forth. They may be working on a project and texting me when they can. And one of the beauties of texting versus a phone call is I can send a text out or they can send a text to me. And in real time, we can get back and forth as is convenient, as long as it's not a deadline. Obviously sense of urgency requires an email or a phone call to make things happen. So things have changed, and I want to interview HR management, assuming that I have a very good HR manager, which does occur occasionally. But more importantly, I want to always interview the hiring manager and the hiring team and make sure that we can kind of work through it. And you take a lot of information in, Sam, and then just boil it down to these are the facts that we need. And sometimes the competencies are important, but the skill set is even more important, especially in healthcare. You've got to have an RN with certain areas. And again, using this example from yesterday, they told me they wanted somebody with not only aesthetic abilities, but they want aesthetic, actual documented aesthetic licensing, which is very rare. There's only a couple of companies that do that. So the search just went from difficult to very difficult, but they're actually willing to pay top dollar in a fee, which is very difficult these days because it's become more competitive. So we're interviewing a lot of people right now to reach those competencies.
And if I may throw in what we're doing to address that problem is that since our company is now utilizing the TMA method, we're putting all of our trainers through the training process for understanding competencies and passions and drives. And we're going to include Monte in the process so that he has a better awareness of what our leaders are actually looking for. And we believe that's going to reduce this time of back and forth texting and perhaps getting candidates that are way too qualified, because our specialty is not only having some exposure to healthcare, but also being good at sales. And that's kind of hard to find for a middle level type of professional. So,
one of the interesting things is I would say it was a difficult find before, but now with COVID and seeing that most of your offices are set up in mall locations, I'm getting a lot of very interested candidates who are ready to go forward, and either Susan, the hiring manager, the director, will talk to them, or in the interview process, when they find out they've got to be exposed to a large variety of people, even with all the safety precautions that Rocky Mountain Healthcare Advocates takes, they just, and it doesn't happen right away because they're sold on the idea. They love the concept. Many of them want to get into more of a medical background or want to apply their sales skills, but they're just become overwhelmed by it. And I think sometimes they talk to their families or give it more thought, and they just don't want to be that exposed to COVID. So it's tricky. It really is. And that's what we've heard in the last few months.
So Monte, I know that there's there's a lot of new trends as far as what you might be looking for candidates in certain types of competencies due to the pandemic. And Sumit, I think Carol put a couple up there. What did she mention there?
So she, in fact, put up a really interesting list. She mentioned communication, flexibility, change management, and empathy as part of her list. And in fact, I've got a slightly related question to that. That while we're, I mean, as practitioners, we're quite clear that we do need new competencies. Monty, how do you influence, or how do you get HR managers and leaders to think that what they've been doing is no longer relevant or needs to be changed? And what are the new competencies to be looked at in the new age? And the traditional mindset won't really work necessarily in a post-COVID world.
Well, that's kind of the $1,000,000 question, if you will, Sumit. What were important competencies in the past still on a core level are, but with COVID and other things changing right now in the workplace, as Sam pointed out, with unemployment being 10% or higher, there are a lot of candidates who are also adjusting their skill sets, also adjusting some of their competencies, education-wise, changing industries. I've had several nurse practitioners decide that they do not want to continue working as nurse practitioners in a certain field and changing over into other fields or other sub competencies. So it's tricky. It really is. I think the future is going to be told that those who adaptation is the most important thing. And on your list, I think one of the things that you brought up that's very important is empathy. Can we empathize with candidates? Can we empathize with clients? Can we slow our world down enough to be able to say, this person matters, they've got 90% of what we're looking for. We're not trying to put a round peg in a square hole, but sometimes I have to go back to my clients, which I will be doing later today with the example I brought up earlier, and say, so you're looking for the platinum unicorn. I can deliver this, but it's going to take 6 months. That's my estimation, or maybe never. It may not happen. But so I think managing expectations is important, Sumit. I think managing expectations both on the candidate side and the client side, and trying to meet the gap halfway. And as I was mentioning earlier with Shar, what I like to do, in Char's example, is I like to send a lot of resumes in and then have the HR manager or hiring manager adjust it. And that has become even more prevalent in our COVID world, if you will, or there's more testing that's happening, if you will, as far as them being selective. And in healthcare, a year ago, if you had a nurse with a pulse and who could fog a mirror, she was getting hired. These days, they're basically stepping back and saying, clients are stepping back and saying, oh, I don't think so. We are, at this point, it's more important that our core competencies are met. And guess what? We've got 3 or 4 other things that we didn't need previously that we now need. In the example of aesthetic nursing, they had 2 positions. Now they're going to boil it into 1. And they didn't tell me in the beginning, but now we know, and we'll make adjustments. Does that help answer your question, Sumit?
Oh, absolutely, it does. Although I still am not sure about the empathy part of it. Some kind of a fence sitter on that one. There's an interesting book I've been meaning to read. It's called Against Empathy and the Case for Rational Compassion. So it's written by a Canadian psychologist, and the person argues that compassion is good, but stepping into the shoes of somebody who's facing a certain situation can potentially create more problems than it solves, because you lose the ability to think objectively. So on the face of it, it sounds like a compelling argument, although I guess I'll discover more when I do read the book.
Well, it sounds like I need to read the book too, because that's, our core values is compassion, dignity, and respect. And Monty knows that that's our core values. And so maybe, things are changing in that regard as well. And so, we're all learning and adapting. So very good point, Sumit.
Yeah, so you have to tell us a little bit more about that when you read the book. I know that humanization or treating people more human-like in this and this age is quite important. So yeah, I'd love to hear about your discovery there. I'm sorry, you were
Sure,
going to
will
say,
do.
Monty? I didn't mean to cut you off there.
Oh, no, my only point on that, Sumit brings up a great point, and it's important to empathize with people, but at the same time, we have to achieve our goals. So I think it's important to compartmentalize. It's important to feel. Sympathy is important. I think empathy is more important. You know, you've got to be able to go through what somebody else has had, and then always coming back. What is the goal? And you have to have a rational mind in the hiring process, right? Because there are accountabilities. It's your job. Whether you're the hiring manager, whether you're a recruiter, HR manager, whether you're a part of the team, you know, we have to always stay objective and at the same time treat people well. You know, in a world where ghosting happens a lot, and Shara and I have talked about this. I mean, you get a great candidate, it's interview time, there's no show, and you have egg
Yes.
on your face. And the more qualified the candidate is, the more upset the client is. And you know, what do you do? And that's part of the technology issues, because there's not as much face-to-face, because there's not as much sit down, there's not as much connection, there's not as much empathy. People, and I wouldn't pick on a particular age group or demographic, but you know, we have trouble sometimes with millennials just saying, it's not that important. If I'm an RN, I have 5 opportunities. So if this doesn't fit exactly where I want anywhere along the process, I'm going to drop off. And you know, we have specific strategies to go find people that are ghosting us, because once our client tells us what to do, we're like bloodhounds. We go after it.
Can we talk about that a little bit more, Monty? I mean, this trend of ghosting that's happened over the past several years is so odd to me. I mean, I remember when I started looking for a job in my career that, you know, I'd spend, you know, days sweating it out and preparing for the interview and you know, and putting together my resume and questions to make sure I did my best approach. And now the fact that we just have people not even showing up or showing lack of care. What are your thoughts on that? What are the contributors?
I agree with you, Sam. I remember I was a professional interviewer for about 4 years in my corporate career, because I wanted to know what was happening on the other side. I wanted to see opportunities. I wanted to move up and be promoted. So I was constantly preparing. I was always working on my resume. I was consistently working towards goals. And what I'd say now is it's a lack of preparation on the candidate's part, and a lack of what I would call due diligence. You know, as a professional, you always want to put yourself forward the best you can. Some of the demographics that I'm working with now, especially within healthcare, previously to COVID, they just really had too many opportunities put in front of them, if that makes sense. You know, there were so many jobs and so many recruiters, and time was so short to get people in, that it became almost I've had candidates send back to me notes that say, if you're not paying me $45 an hour, I don't even want to go further with the discussion. I thought to myself, well, what if there's other parts about this job besides pay that might be important to you?
Right.
But if you're just going to make it about pay, and you're working in a horrible job, and you know, I worked, just as an example, I worked for a long-term care facility in Oakland, one of the toughest parts of Oakland, and it was a constant challenge. And I was constantly milling candidates through it, because they had to be able to meet not only core competencies, but ethnic competencies and other areas where they had to fit in. And they also had to be very brave, because they had to go into a neighborhood that was very difficult to go into. Once they got there, they had great security and the facility was beautiful. But to get people to actually go to the interview could be tough. So what I started to do is only recruit candidates from Oakland. I mean, if I could win across the Bay to San Francisco, my percentage of not only placing the candidate, but having them show up for the first interview was less than 20%. If I was working with somebody in Oakland, it was over 80. So sometimes knowing, you know, the ins and outs of the situation, or some of the finer points, will help you recruit better, both as a client and as a recruiter. So it's important.
And if I may add, from a manager perspective and an actual hiring leader, or manages hiring leaders, is now recruiting, particularly in the service industry, requires, you know, meeting people face to face with COVID concerns. And it seems like we're seeing, like the RNs and the nurse practitioners and the medical professionals, and what our ideal candidate is to have some medical background plus selling background. But then a lot of people are saying, I want to work from home. I want to work a remote job. And so they desire the pay that we have. I think they like the fact that we are building a very great culture, and they've probably heard that we have a great culture, but then the reality becomes, oh my goodness, I have to be working face to face with people. And so it can be a real challenge, because the reality of our work environment is that's, be it I'm a nurse or not, that's the reality. Sometimes you have to work in jobs where you have to face the public. So the reality truly hits when candidates actually walk into the locations, see the actual face-to-face environment, and turn around and walk out and ghost the recruiter and ghost the hiring manager.
It's very
And
frustrating. It really is.
yes.
You know, in your situation, Shar, in recruiting for Rocky Mountain Healthcare Advocates, I'm really glad we structured our contract the way we did, because if we had made the number of placements we've made so far and candidates falling off, it would have been interesting, because having structured more of a monthly situation where we're really continuing to do it, I have a very optimistic approach to recruiting. And I would say we're not a grist mill type recruiting. We're very organization. We're very focused. And what we're going to have to do is ramp up the number of candidates that come through, and just really see who's willing to show up and work. I mean, that is, believe it or not, that's a core competency now.
Yeah.
Do you have a work ethic that will allow you to show up in a very difficult time? And earlier in my career at Frito-Lay, right after college, I had to run a route for 6 months. And I thought to myself, okay, I worked my butt off for 4 years and worked full-time, went to school full-time. And now at 5:30 in the morning, I'm out running a route delivering snack food. Well, for later on, as we were hiring people, we would try and dissuade them from the job. What we tell them is, okay, you have to be up at 4:30 in the morning. You're going to have to work 12-hour days. Is this something you can really do? And a lot of people would start backing out. You know, they didn't realize, they thought there was, you know, they see the marketing program and they want to be part of the company. The reality is quite a bit grittier. And I think that's the same thing. I mean, we really have kind of a medical representative position in Shar's company, and a lot of people want to break into medical, and a lot of people want to be a rep, or they want to be a durable goods rep within medical, and they see Rocky Mountain Healthcare Advocates not only as a good company, but also as a stepping stone. So we have to be very careful that we get people that are transparent, and sometimes you can't tell, and they don't even know. So digging in deep and digging in deeper is what we're going to do, and we're going to put more candidates through at a little bit lower, not competency level, but maybe a little bit lower expectation level coming in. And it's an adjustment, right?
Well, and that's what's exciting about including you into our TMA method training that we have not kicked off yet. And we are putting our leaders through a 10-week program and including Monty into that program, so that we can realign the expectations of the competencies and the behaviors that we need. And realistically, we want to be a stepping stone, as long as we can keep our candidates for 2 to 4 years, because we know many of our candidates have passions and perhaps want to be an RN or want to move into a different type of position. And so our company is perfect to be a stepping stone. So that's what's so exciting.
Yeah, so I just wanted to show real quick the competencies that are available in the TMA method, and based on what we've been talking about, I mean, this can be a great way to communicate with your recruiting team and your hiring manager of different options that you can explore to define the job to get that ready for the hiring process, right?
Correct.
So now this is a free tool. I mean, if you go to the competencylibrary.com, you can dig into this. And the cool thing about it is that there's a lot of additional features that are available in this tool to explore. So I'd encourage you to do that, such as it gives different behavioral examples, development, interview type of questions managers can do. So it's a pretty handy tool.
And so what we're going to be doing with Monte is right now he does the pre-interviews, and then my leaders are utilizing this tool, although the app has changed a little bit and we're improving our app and technology all the time. But as long as Monte and his recruitment, a team of experts, understand that we are hiring for competencies and behaviors and utilizing these screening questions, and our recruitment team has a good understanding of that process, then it'll improve when my actual hiring leaders interview the top 3 to 5 candidates.
Mm-hmm.
And so we are going through a transformation right now, actually. And we are acting as a pilot to utilize this process. And we have been utilizing this process for the last 4 to 5 months. And the quality of our candidates have rocketed. We hired on Monte only, I think, a couple months ago. But we are now already seeing that our productivity and our volume and the return on our investment has only tripled. And I can honestly tell you that our financial guys are super pleased because we are hiring better quality talent.
Mm-hmm.
That and they know that we believe in their career development and their personal development that's in line with their passions, goals, and motivations.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually made a major impact on my little company of 20 employees. And so our company is going to be growing, and using this new method, we're definitely going to be growing probably 3 times larger than we currently are.
Yeah, I think it's good to have a infrastructure in place that you can leverage for that fast growth, and so it's good to have those communication tools in place. So
and it starts with talent acquisition, though.
Mm-hmm.
So so that's why I love that we have Monte on today, because it starts here.
Yeah. So Monte, I mean, as far as I imagine you probably have this conversation with your clients a lot, but the importance. What have you seen go wrong with certain clients when where they've come to you because they've hired the wrong person, and what are the stories that you've heard and why they've seeked you out?
Well, that's a great question, Sam. Because we're very technical in our healthcare side, when I have a surgery center that actually had hired an RN who turned out to be incompetent, and they couldn't tell in the beginning because she actually had a great resume and a great background. But what ended up happening was the candidate was not able to perform functions at the level that she had committed. So when this happens and they go through the process of removing the candidate or the employee from the organization, it's very painful because they put a lot of time and effort into training. And the candidate has either misrepresented what they've done or didn't understand what level the surgery center was operating on. I usually get the frantic call. I go from being on somebody's D list to their A list. And that's exciting for us. We want to be there. As Shar knows, the more activity we get, the faster and harder we work. And I think the more urgent the situation is, the quicker my team steps up. So we get energized, if you will, to kind of come in and solve a problem. And We've had both things on the consumer product side, where maybe a vice president has gone off the rails, if you will, and has not done their proper functioning. You know, unfortunately, in one situation, we had an internal theft problem by a CFO. And, you know, when you get those problems, you get a client who's very motivated, not only to make a fast decision, but they also want to make a great decision because now they're kind of wide open and they're bleeding, if you will. And bleeding green is bad for a corporation. So we've had a lot of weird situations come up over time. I've had CEOs that have hired me and have been gone a week later under some weird
Yeah.
situations. You know, a lot of interesting stories, some of which I can tell, and some of which, because of confidentiality, I can never tell. Maybe I'll write a tell-all book when I retire, but I mean, there's
Me
some
too.
days, right? Exactly. Shar and I could probably co-author one. We could probably get feedback from Sam and submit as well and have a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, we could.
my wife works in healthcare, and she actually is an admissions director for the largest hospice in Las Vegas. And, you know, her stories are amazing as well. And at the end of the day, sometimes all we can do is drink wine and talk about how weird things happen. So it's pretty interesting, the stories of the people stories. And that's what makes it great, you know. But anyway, that answers your question, Sam.
It does, and I know we're approaching the top of the hour, so I just wanted to give people a chance to ask a few questions, and also, you know, where can people go to find out more about you and your services?
Absolutely, they can go to recruitingnetwork.net. That's our company homepage. Probably the best way to interact with me on LinkedIn. You can find me. My name is pretty unique, Monte, M-O-N-T-E, last name George. There's not a lot of us floating around, and if you still can't find it, just put a comma and put in Las Vegas, and it should come up in LinkedIn. But you know, I actually would like to go through one more thing before we get into the questions, or maybe as we go through it. We've talked a lot about competencies, but we haven't talked a lot about behavior. So if I can get back to the presentation and open that up, we can talk about this, because behavior, right behavior, is really important in an organization, and in some ways is as important as a competency. So if I may, I'd like to go back to the screen.
Sure. Yeah, just go ahead and share your screen and bring that back up there.
Okay, great. I'm gonna jump some slides here. I wouldn't say I over-prepared, but I was ready. Okay, let's talk about right behaviors. And a lot of these are common sense for the people here, but not so much common sense with candidates. Everybody's living their life, things happen, but in right behaviors, the first thing we want is a positive can-do attitude. Nobody likes a negative Nelly. Nobody wants someone who brings problems, you know, that are inappropriate or, you know, personal to the workplace. It happens, but it needs to be minimized. And these are really important. These right behaviors, as I was going through it, I was really thinking about Rocky Mountain Healthcare Advocates, because as Shar said, we're going through a transitional mode right now. You know, we're evolving. And this is super important. This next one, courteous and friendly. You know, in an environment where you're interacting with a lot of customers, you need people who are approachable. You need people who, you know, people off the street or in the mall feel very comfortable talking to them. And, you know, we've hired some people that are so friendly and so warm. And, you know, when I'm working with Susan and she sends a note back saying, I love this person, they're exactly what I'm looking for, I think to myself, I think we've hit the right behaviors. The next one, consistently meets deadlines. You know, we don't want any flaky people. We don't want people that overcommit and underdeliver. The next one's very important as well. Gladly takes responsibility. I think that in Shar's environment, it's very important to get people who not only want to do their job as a rep, but maybe want to go as a manager, or just maybe fill in as a manager, or, you know, whatever it takes to open, you know, the kiosk, close the kiosk. You need people who are willing to take responsibility when that becomes available to them. And then, of course, anytime you're working in retail or with the public, good attendance and punctuality is key. No late people. That's not acceptable. So I just want to go through some of the right behaviors and maybe open it up to see what you guys think.
No, this is great. I was just looking at some of the comments online. So, Sumit, I know you've been following this closely. Have you seen some good questions or comments that you would like to highlight?
So in fact, there are a couple of comments about interviewing for what if scenarios rather than based on what people have done in the past. So as a trained and certified behavioral event interviewer, that's something I'm not too sure about. For like the theory of behavioral interviewing is that the past predicts the future. So especially for mid-career or senior executives, I mean, I would frame questions and probe people on what they've done earlier to see if any of the kind of work they've done ties in with the competencies and even the behaviors that I'm looking for. So, for example, when you're talking about being courteous and friendly, when you're looking for people who are team players, you can watch out for whether the person's entire answer is structured around, I did this, I'm so phenomenal, I'm brilliant, or whether they do give credit to other people. So you can gauge some of the behaviors if you've got the right skills in place. So it's important to have the right competencies. It's also important to have what's called a behaviorally anchored rating scale or a bars in place. I'm a little uncertain about what if scenarios because I think they don't really do justice to the interview process. It's easy to give an ideal answer and an answer that's politically correct and kind of in place without being too sincere. But I'd love to hear what you guys think as well.
Well, I would say my question would be, since we only have 1 minute left, because we are working on trying to keep our forums to an hour now. But you have excellent questions to submit, and you always do, as well as all of those on our chat. So thank you guys for participating. Those are excellent questions. So my question would be, I think we are needing to wrap up actually, because we're at the top of the hour. But I would also suggest that if you want to email us, please do at and Sam, would you like to explain this workshop?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we're having a international TMA workshop, we're going to hear a lot of brilliant speakers this next month. And so if you're interested in learning more about the TMA method, how to use integrated talent management in your organization, please feel free to sign up for the workshop. You can do that through this forum, or I'm sure if you just look at LinkedIn and search it, you'll see a lot of opportunities there to sign up. Also, I wanted to mention our speaker for next week. We have we have Wendy Graham that's going to speak on building employee loyalty with effective onboarding strategies. And so Wendy is an expert on bringing people on board many different companies, setting those expectations, understanding how they tick and work and can best be integrated into the workplace. And so do join us for that discussion next week.
Thank you, Sam. And so yes, you can take advantage and have a poll discussion with us if you go to the poll. If not, you can go to compteam.net and find Sam's communication and email. If there's any questions, we are going to go through all the chat and get back to you. And also you can talk to us individually. And I'm happy to share my experience going through the growing pains of a company and transforming my talent management strategy with the blessings of this team. So it sounds like we need to wrap up right now. And thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Monte, you are awesome. And I love what you have to say. And of course, we're going to have you back so you can finish that presentation.
It's been a pleasure, Shar. I love to come back anytime you'll have me.
You're awesome. So thank you, everyone. We want to thank you and hope you can have a great rest of your week. And if you're in the snow, dig out safely without hurting your back. Or if you're in the ocean, don't hurt your ribs when you hit the ocean floor like I did.
Oh, enjoy
So
those
anyway,
margaritas, Shar.
yeah, less of those for sure. We're working on that.
All right.
All right, guys. Well, thank
Thank
you
you,
so
everyone.
much. We really appreciate your time.
Have a
Have a
wonderful
great
day.
day.
Thank you, everyone.
Take
Bye.
care.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.